Some doors are built to look like opportunities. Before we begin, if you're new here, welcome. And if you're one of our amazing returning viewers, thank you for being back. This is Stale by Oluwatena. The morning before everything. The kind of morning that makes you forget Nigeria can be difficult. The air in Lekki Phase 1 carried that particular early freshness, the kind that exists for exactly 40 minutes before the sun remembers itself and the humidity rolls back in like an uninvited guest who owns the house. Sprinklers whispered against manicured lawns behind high walls. A security guard at the end of a cul-de-sac sipped tea from a flask and nodded at a passing car. 2 streets over, a generator hummed a low, satisfied note, the sound of a household that had never once needed to ration its comfort. In a bedroom on the second floor of a cream-colored duplex with a bougainvillea climbing its left wall, Adaeze was already awake. She was sitting at her desk, not studying, not scrolling, just sitting, in the particular stillness of a person whose mind had been working long before her body caught up. She was 20 years old, second year, Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Lagos. She was 5 feet 10 in flat shoes. She had her mother's eyes, deep set, absorptive, the kind that took in a room before committing to an expression, and her father's spine, which is to say, she sat and stood and moved as though she had been told once, very early, that the world responds to posture. On her phone screen glowed a WhatsApp message from Chisom. Are you awake? Obviously you are awake. You are always awake. Pick me up in 30. I'm not taking the Okada again. The man nearly killed me last week. Adaeze smiled the small private smile of someone receiving a message they expected. She typed back, 25 minutes. I will not wait. 3 streets away, in an equally comfortable bedroom, inside a house that smelled permanently of her mother's preferred Jo Malone candle, Chisom Eze read the reply, rolled her eyes affectionately, and got out of bed. They had been best friends for 6 years. They had survived secondary school together, the politics of dormitory life, the tyranny of certain teachers, the social mathematics of who sat where and why, and had arrived at university as a self-contained unit, not closed off, not unfriendly, but complete in the way that a sentence is complete. You could add to it, you could appreciate it, but you could not fundamentally alter its structure without breaking something. People noticed them. They always had. It was not only the height or the way they dressed understated, precise, the kind of clothing that costs more because it shouts less, or even their separate beauty, which was the sort that stops a conversation mid-sentence. It was something harder to name, an atmosphere, the composed certainty of young women who had grown up knowing that the floor beneath them was solid, and who had, as a result, never learned to perform desperation. They did not know yet that someone had already noticed this about them and was already planning around it. Enter the architect. Introduction to International Development Policy was on paper one of the drier electives in the faculty timetable. In practice, it had become the most quietly anticipated class of the week, and that had everything to do with the man who taught it. Dr. Emeka Fasanya entered lecture halls the way certain men enter rooms, slowly, deliberately, giving the space time to understand that something significant had arrived. He was in his mid-40s, with a shaved head, a trimmed salt and pepper beard, and the kind of posture that institutions reward, straight, unhurried, faintly imperial. His PhD was from a university in the Netherlands. His published papers sat in journals that required institutional access. His wife appeared at faculty events in silk and smiled at the right moment. He set his leather folio on the lectern, removed his glasses, which several sharp-eyed students had quietly noted he never actually needed, and surveyed the room. 112 students looked back at him. He began without preamble. Let us discuss today the infrastructure of dependency, how systems are constructed economically, politically, socially, to ensure that certain populations remain permanently in need of what others control. In the third row, Blessing Okafor wrote this down verbatim because Blessing wrote everything down verbatim. She was from Nnewi. She was on a partial scholarship that required her to maintain a 3.7 GPA or above every semester. Her mother called every Sunday evening and asked about grades before she asked about anything else. She was one of the most genuinely intelligent people in the room, and also, at this particular moment in her life, one of the most financially exhausted. If you are enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with friends who need to learn and be aware of their surroundings. Girls are trafficked for drug from school every day. She wrote, and she listened, and she did not notice the way Dr. Fasanya's gaze moved, not randomly, the way a lecturer's gaze moves, but with the quiet precision of a man conducting a very different kind of inventory. 4 seats to Blessing's left, Fatima Abdullahi was half listening and half composing a text message she would not send. Fatima was from Abuja. Her parents had finalized their divorce 3 months ago, a development that had fractured her sense of home so completely that she was still living in the wreckage of it, sorting through pieces, unsure what to keep. She was beautiful in an open, immediate way, the kind of face that strangers felt comfortable approaching, and she had, since the divorce, developed a hunger for warmth that she mistook regularly for wisdom. Behind them both, near the window, Nneka Obi, who had not told anyone at university that she had a 4-year-old daughter waiting for her at home in Surulere, who worked 3 nights a week at a data entry job that paid 12,000 naira a month, who was here on sheer, grinding determination and the belief that education was the last door she had not yet tried. And in the back row, deliberately occupying the corners of the room they had claimed as theirs, Adaeze and Chisom, who had chosen this elective because it fit their timetable and who were already, separately, composing private assessments of the man at the front. Too deliberate, Adaeze thought. The glasses he doesn't need. The pause before every sentence. He is performing authority, not exercising it. Chisom, for her part, was watching the students more than the lecturer, watching who was leaning forward, who was taking that particular kind of notes, not academic notes, but personal ones, the kind you take when someone has said something that feels like it was addressed specifically to you. She elbowed Adaeze and tilted her head slightly toward the third row. Adaeze saw Blessing's notebook, saw the intensity, said nothing, filed it. Then the door opened and Tunde Afolabi walked in. He was 23, 6 feet 2, the kind of light brown complexion that catches light differently depending on the angle, warm in sun, cool in shadow. He had the bone structure of someone whose face had simply decided very early on its final form and committed fully. He wore a plain white shirt, dark trousers, clean sneakers, and carried nothing except a phone and the particular confidence of a man who has never once been told he was not welcome somewhere. He looked around the room, unhurried, pleasant, and found a seat near the middle. "My apologies, Dr. Fasanya," he said simply, not groveling, not performing, just acknowledging. Dr. Fasanya nodded once, as though this were an expected interruption and not an inconvenient one, as though the two of them had a private understanding about shadows, because they did. Several girls had looked up when he walked in. Tunde noticed. He had always noticed things like that. It was, for him, a professional skill. If trust were a building, Tunde Afolabi would have been the finest architect Lagos never officially produced. He understood, with the instinct of someone who had studied it closely, that trust is not given in one transaction. It is assembled brick by brick, gesture by gesture, over time, through the patient cumulation of small, memorable kindnesses. He started with Sade Adeyemi because Sade was the loudest, and loud people are socially central without always being socially secure. He laughed at her jokes, which were genuinely funny. He remembered that she drank her tea without milk. When she mentioned that she had failed her first statistics quiz, he spent 45 minutes with her at a canteen table, walking through the material, and refused to let her pay for his meal. He started with Nneka by noticing that she was always tired, not asking about it, just handing her a sachet of Nescafe one morning with a quiet, "You look like you need this more than I do." Nothing more, nothing that required a response, just a small gesture that cost him nothing and bought him, in Nneka's exhausted heart, an enormous amount of goodwill. With Blessing, he was strategic. He found her struggling over a literature review and sat beside her, not hovering, not condescending, but collaborative, as though they were solving a problem together rather than him rescuing her. When the assignment came back with an A, Blessing looked for him first. He waved off her gratitude. That was the move. Refusing gratitude is the quickest way to be trusted. With Fatima, he was simply present, available. He never asked about the divorce. He had heard it mentioned, third hand, and filed it away. But he had a way of sitting with people in their silences that felt, to someone in the aftermath of a broken home, almost unbearably comforting. Within 3 weeks, he had assembled a group. He called them, lightly, a study circle. He booked a seminar room on Tuesday evenings. He kept it informal. Food was always present. Conversation wandered freely. The academic work was real enough to justify being there. He invited Dr. Fasanya once, casually, as though the idea had just occurred to him, and the lecturer had come for 40 minutes, engaged warmly with the students, and left them feeling, somehow, that they had been seen by someone important. It was a beautifully constructed machine. Adaeze attended twice. On the third Tuesday, she and Chisom were absent. Tunde noted this, did not mention it, noted it. The apartment was on the third floor of a small block in Yaba, 12 minutes from campus. It had actual curtains, the kind of kitchen where the gas never ran out, a bookshelf that had been assembled from both their personal libraries and had grown over 2 years into something that reflected both of them, Chisom's political theory and biography, stacked alongside Adeze's psychology and African literature, everything slightly disordered in the pleasant way of shelves that are actually used. Adaeze was making tea when Chisom came home from an afternoon lecture, dropped her bag against the wall, and said without preamble, Fatima told me she might be getting a scholarship opportunity through Dr. Fasanya. The kettle continued to boil. Through Tunde, Adaeze said, not a question. Through Tunde, yes. Chisom pulled out a chair and sat. She was very excited, said it was an international research fellowship, Europe, expenses covered. Did she say which institution? Some organization. She showed me the name. I didn't recognize it. Adaeze poured water into 2 mugs, brought them to the table, sat down. She turned her mug in her hands, a thinking gesture, one Chisom had seen 10,000 times. Chisom, when has Dr. Fasanya ever announced an international scholarship through a study group? A pause. He hasn't. When is any legitimate fellowship delivered through a course representative, informally, without being on the faculty portal? Another pause. Never. And when a man spends 3 weeks making himself indispensable to a group of young women before producing an opportunity, Adaeze looked up. What is that called? Chisom was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a bus horn sounded, distant and ordinary. Investment, she said. Yes, Adaeze said. Investment. And investors want returns. They drank their tea. The others won't believe us, Chisom said finally. They like him. Tunde, I mean. Blessing trusts him. Fatima really trusts him. I know. So what do we do? Adaeze set down her mug. She had the expression she got when she had already decided something and was simply waiting for the conversation to catch up with her. I send the information to my father, she said. The document Fatima had photographed and shared in their WhatsApp group, the fellowship offer, with its logo and its Amsterdam address and its reference number, sat now on Adeze's screen. She forwarded it to her father with a single message. Papa, look at this and tell me what you see. She put the phone down. She went back to her reading. She waited. The call came in 41 minutes. Justice Emmanuel Okonkwo, retired, but only from the bench, never from the habits of mind that 30 years of law had carved into him, spoke in the voice of a man who had already done several things before dialing. This organization does not exist, he said, not as a question, as a verdict. The address in Amsterdam is a mail redirection service. The registration number they have used belongs to a dissolved logistics company. The letterhead is a composition. Someone who is clever, but not quite clever enough. I thought so, Adaeze said. You thought so before you sent it to me. I needed the confirmation, Papa, and I needed it to come from someone with the right connections to do something about it. A silence that carried within it the complicated emotion of a father who is proud of his daughter's mind and terrified of the situation that mind has identified. How many girls? He asked. 3 who are already excited, probably more being cultivated. There's a lecturer, Dr. Fasanya, Faculty of Social Sciences, and a student, final year, named Tunde Afolabi. He is the connector. Fasanya. A pause. Something in the way he said the name suggested he was already writing it down. I am going to make 2 calls tonight. You do not do anything. You do not confront anyone. You do not let them know you know. Do you understand me? Yes, Papa. Adaeze. Papa, you are sure about your own safety, you and Chisom. We never joined the group properly. We are backgrounds to them. They are not focused on us. Keep it that way. You are my daughter, not my colleague. Stay in the background. Papa, I am already in the background. I have been in the background since the second Tuesday. Another pause. Then, quietly, your mother's eyes. Your mother's eyes, but my brain. God has a sense of humor. He hung up. Adaeze sat with the phone in her hand for a moment, then placed it face down on the desk and returned to her book. She did not sleep well that night, but that, she had decided, was the correct price for being awake. What no one in the study group saw, what they were architecturally prevented from seeing, was the room. Tunde's room was ordinary on its surface. A bed, a desk, a wardrobe, a small fridge, a laptop, a phone charger, the smell of a decent cologne. The kind of room that would reveal nothing alarming to a casual visitor. But the laptop had 3 open windows. One showed a spreadsheet, names, notes, status indicators in columns that were labeled clinically with categories a recruitment coordinator might use. Responsive, financial pressure, emotional vulnerability, travel document status. Recommended, yes/hold. The second window showed a WhatsApp web session, a conversation with a contact, saved only as EF. The messages were short, practical. 3 confirmed interested, 2 hesitant. The 2 hesitant ones, not worth pursuing. They have family. Understood. Focus on confirmed 3. Timeline still holds. What about the tall ones? First year. Second year. Leave them. They don't need anything from us. That kind of girl is trouble. Agreed. The third window was a flight booking portal. Tunde leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. He was not, in this moment, the warm and attentive person the study group knew. He was something closer to what he actually was. A young man who had, 2 years ago, been in almost exactly the same position as Blessing. Broke, brilliant, honored, and who had made a choice that he no longer examined closely because examination was expensive and he had decided he could not afford it. He told himself regularly that he was not the architect of this. He was only a component. He told himself this with less and less conviction every time. He opened the flight portal and continued. Sade Adeyemi had a gift for laughter. She had deployed it for most of her life as a kind of armor. The social kind that keeps people warm while also keeping them at a comfortable distance from the more complicated parts of you. She was funny. She was present. She was the kind of friend you wanted at every gathering because she made the air lighter. She also, underneath the performance, had her mother's instincts. Her mother was a market woman in Ibadan who could spot a dishonest trader from 3 stalls away, who had survived enough of the world's nonsense to develop what she called third eye for nonsense. She had tried to pass this to her daughter. Sade had absorbed more of it than she realized. That evening, sitting on her hostel bed, she was replaying a conversation with Tunde from earlier in the day. He had asked casually, almost as a parenthesis, Your international passport, is it still valid? The fellowship application needs it early, so it's good to know where people stand. She had said yes and moved on. But now, lying in the particular silence of a hostel corridor on a Tuesday evening, she heard the sentence differently. Not, do you have a passport? But, where does your passport stand? As though it were an asset being assessed. As though he were already moving it on a board. She sat up. She thought about Nneka, who had mentioned excitedly that she would finally be able to send her daughter something from abroad. She thought about Blessing's relief when she talked about the stipend, the specific relief of someone carrying a weight that watching miraculously been lifted. She thought about Fatima saying, "It's like a sign, like the year is finally turning." She thought about Adaeze and Chisom, who had stopped coming to the study sessions and who had offered no explanation, and who moved through campus with the same copy composure as always, as though they were outside a building that others were standing inside. They know something, Shade thought. She picked up her phone. She stared at Chisom's contact for 30 seconds. Then she possessed call. Chisom had made jollof, the real kind, smoky from the bottom of the pot, and set 3 plates before anyone had explicitly agreed to eat together. This was her way. Food as infrastructure, warmth as architecture. Shade sat across the kitchen table and told them what had caught in her chest, the passport comment, the way Tunde's voice had shifted barely perceptibly when he discussed the fellowship details, from warm to transactional. The look that had passed between him and Dr. Fasanya after a lecture last week, just before Dr. Fasanya turned away, brief, calibrated, not the look of a lecturer and a student, the look of 2 people conducting a shared project. She talked for 12 minutes. Then she stopped. The apartment was quiet. "You already know," Shade said, not accusing, just reading the room. "Yes," Adaeze said. "How long?" "Long enough." Shade looked at the table, then back up. Blessing, Fatima, Nneka. "Yes. They are going to go, aren't they, if we don't?" "My father is already working on it," Adaeze said. "It is being handled from a level that cannot be dismissed or bought off. But I need you to do something." "What?" "Nothing dramatic, nothing that alerts them. I need you to stay close to the 3 girls, not to warn them yet, not until the right moment, because a premature warning gives Tunde and Fasanya time to adjust. But I need you present. If anything moves faster than expected, you call me immediately." Shade was quiet for a moment. "You planned this," she said, "using me." "I didn't plan for you to call," Adaeze said honestly. "But yes, now that you have, you are useful. You are trusted by all 3 of them in a way that Chisom and I are not, because we pulled back. They see us as distant. They see you as one of them. Because I am one of them." Yes. A pause. "Which is exactly why you noticed something wrong when we couldn't get close enough to see it ourselves." Shade picked up her fork. She ate a mouthful of jollof. It was very good. "Fine," she said. "Thank you," Chisom said, topping up her water. "Don't thank me. Just make sure your father's people are actually fast." "My father's people," Adaeze said, with a precision that was almost humorous, "have been fast since before we were born. They came on a Thursday, 3 envelopes, hand-delivered to Tunde's room by a man none of the girls had met, a quiet, efficient man who appeared and disappeared with the practiced invisibility of someone paid for discretion. The envelopes contained travel documents, Nigerian passports with valid EU entry visas, stamped with an authority that looked to an untrained eye entirely real, flight itineraries, a letter of welcome from the fictional Amsterdam organization, now elaborated into a full personality, a website, a social media presence, stock photos of smiling professionals in clean offices. It was an impressive forgery. It was also, by Thursday afternoon, entirely documented, photographed, registered, and sitting in a file at the NAPTIP office in Lagos, alongside 3 months' worth of financial transaction records that Chisom's father's team had excavated from Dr. Fasaya's constellation of shell accounts. The mousetrap had food in it. All that remained was timing. Tunde called the group together Friday evening, framed it as a celebration, a send-off. Let's honor these girls before their big opportunity. He bought small chops. He was warm and present and full of the generous enthusiasm that had, from the very beginning, been his most effective tool. Shade was there. She ate nothing. She smiled at everything. She sent a single message under the table. Friday evening. He's moving them to Sunday. Flights are Sunday. Adaeze read it, forwarded it to her father. Her father forwarded it to the right people. 2 words came back. We are ready. Dr. Emeka Fasanya arrived at his Faculty of Social Sciences office at 7:10 on a Saturday morning, as he often did when the week ahead required preparation, and found 2 men already in the corridor. They were not university staff. They showed identification calmly, politely, with the particular economy of movement that comes from doing a thing many times. They did not raise their voices. There was no drama, no scene. Dr. Fasanya had spent his career constructing the image of a measured, distinguished man, and the officers extended him, without irony, the courtesy of a measured, distinguished arrest. He walked out between them, carrying his briefcase. One student, a first-year girl collecting forgotten notes from a nearby office, saw him pass. She said later that what she remembered most was not his expression, which was blank and sealed, but the briefcase, the way he held it, as though he still believed, in some remote chamber of his mind, that he was going somewhere important. He was, just not where he had planned. At the airport, 4 hours later, Tunde Afolabi arrived at the check-in queue for a Sunday morning flight, a different ticket under a different arrangement, an exit strategy he had prepared with the thoroughness of someone who had always known this day might come. He was 2 people from the counter when someone touched his shoulder. He turned. 3 officers, plain clothes, NAPTIP identification. The bag in his hand contained, among other things, documentation for 3 young women, communication records with 2 international networks, a burner phone with a contact list that would become, over the following months, the basis of arrests in 2 European countries, and 12,000 euros in cash. He did not resist. He stood very still for a moment, the way a building stands still in the seconds before it falls. All that held up weight, all that careful structure, the whole architecture of 2 years. And then he exhaled, set the bag down, and let his hands be taken. The morning after the machine stopped, Adaeze was at her desk again. Same desk, same early morning quality of light, same stillness, but different. Her phone had been busy since 6:30, her father calling, then a call she had not expected from a NAPTIP coordinator who thanked her without elaborating on what she had been thanked for. Then Chisom from across the room. It's done? It's done. Chisom had sat on the edge of her bed for a long moment. Then she had stood up and gone to make tea, which was what she did when she was processing something too large for words. The three girls, Blessing, Fatima, Nneka, had been contacted by investigators the previous evening, gently, carefully, in a language designed to remove the word victim from the immediate conversation and replace it with something less flattening. Their documents had been intercepted. Their cases were being handled. They had not, technically, been harmed, but they had to be told what had almost happened, and almost is its own kind of wound. Sade called at 9:45. Blessing is not speaking, she said. She just keeps looking at the letter, the fake one, like she's trying to find where she should have seen it. Tell her, Adaeze said, that it was designed to be unseen, that this is what it is built for, not to deceive the careless, but to deceive the careful. Tell her that being deceived by a professional architect of deception is not the same thing as being foolish. A pause. I'm not sure she'll hear that right now. No, Adaeze agreed, but say it anyway. Put it somewhere she can return to when she is ready. What the wait actually was. Chisom went to see Nneka alone. She had decided, without discussing it with Adaeze, that Nneka needed a different kind of presence, not the composed, strategic Adaeze, something softer, something that did not require strength in return. She brought nothing. No food this time, no tea, just herself. Nneka's room was small and meticulously organized in the way that the rooms of very busy people often are. Everything in its place because there is no time for the luxury of disorder. A photograph of a small girl in a yellow dress was taped to the wall above the desk. 4 years old, round-cheeked, missing a front tooth, mid-laugh. Nneka sat on her bed and looked at the floor. I was going to send her something from Amsterdam, she said. I'd already decided what I would say. Mama's bringing you something from across the water. I'd been practicing it. Chisom sat beside her, said nothing. I never asked for anything extraordinary, Nneka continued. I just needed something to be easier. Just once. Just one thing to go. She stopped. Chisom put a hand on hers, not performing comfort, just placing herself physically in the space of it. They sat like that for a while. Eventually, Nneka looked up at the photograph on the wall, at the child in yellow, mid-laugh, suspended in that bright particular joy. She does not know how hard this is, she said. No, Chisom said. That's the right order of things, I suppose. Yes, Chisom said. It is. Nneka took a long breath, let it out. I'm going to finish my degree, she said. I know, Chisom said. And then I'm going to get a job that pays real money, legal money, and I'm going to take her somewhere abroad myself, with my own salary and my own passport and my own name on the ticket. Yes, Chisom said. And this time, it was not just agreement, it was witness. The kind of yes that says, I have heard this. I will hold it for you until you get there. The world continues, as it does. The notice appeared on Dr. Fasaya's office door on Monday morning. Dr. E. Fasaya on indefinite administrative leave. Students are advised to contact the faculty administrator for course reassignment. A final year student standing near the faculty notice board told someone that Tunde had been arrested. The someone said, "Which Tunde?" The student said, "Tunde from social sciences, the fine one." The someone said, "Oh," and they moved on to something else. This is how significant things end. Often, not in the drama of their unraveling, but in the ordinary continuation of the world around them. Adaeze and Chisom crossed the main walkway at 9:15, bags over shoulders, unhurried. A girl from their department waved. A lecturer they liked nodded as he passed. The trees were doing what trees do on a morning with good light, throwing shade in clean, useful patches across the concrete. "Do you think he knew?" Chisom said. "How close he was to—" "Yes," Adaeze said. "He knew exactly." "And he still—" "Yes." They walked. "That is the part I cannot—" Chisom stopped. "Tribe again. I understand greed. I understand being cornered. I even understand fear producing bad choices." But he looked at Blessing and saw something to be used. He looked at Neka and saw a spreadsheet entry. Adaeze was quiet for a moment. They passed the fountain, perpetually running, perpetually indifferent. "Some people," she said finally, "learn very early that the world is divided into those who arrange things and those who are arranged. And they choose their side, and they stop seeing the other side as fully real. It is not a mystery. It is just a particular kind of moral collapse, dressed in khaki trousers and a good shirt." Chisom looked at her sideways. "How are you so calm?" "I'm not," Adaeze said. "I am just practiced at being calm in public." Then, quietly, "I keep thinking about the spreadsheet. Tunde's spreadsheet with the columns. Financial pressure, emotional vulnerability, what they needed, and whether it made them useful." "Don't," Chisom said. "I know, but—" "Adaeze." She stopped. "Look at Chisom." "It did not work," Chisom said. "Whatever he built, it did not work. Because Shade noticed. Because you noticed. Because your father has been right about the world for 30 years and chose to use that rightness for something good. It did not work. That is the story." Adaeze looked at her friend, this person she had known since they were 14 years old and sharing a dormitory wardrobe and arguing about whose shoes were whose, and felt, underneath the residue of everything, something solid. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay. It did not work. That is the story." They walked on. Blessing returned to her studies. Her GPA at the end of that semester was 3.9, her highest yet. She called her mother on Sundays and, for the first time, included information about how she was feeling alongside how she was performing. Her mother, to her surprise, preferred the first kind of update. Fatima started seeing a university counselor, not because she was broken, she told herself, But because the year had shown her the cost of seeking warmth from people who had calculated its market value, she decided, to understand her own hunger well enough to feed it properly. The counselor was a small woman with reading glasses and a habit of very long silences that Fatima initially found maddening and later, gradually, found to be the most useful thing anyone had ever offered her. Neka finished her degree 2 years later, second class upper in the end, which her supervisor said was a result that did not adequately reflect her actual ability and which she received with the private knowledge that it had been earned in the margins of a life that never stopped demanding things from her. She took her daughter, then 6 years old, and still missing the same tooth, it was taking its time, to Accra for a weekend, not Amsterdam, but across water. With her own salary, her own passport, her own name on the ticket, exactly as she had promised. She bought the child a yellow dress. Shade graduated, moved to Lagos Island, became, in time, the kind of person that young women called when they were trying to determine whether a situation was safe. She had, by then, something her mother would have recognized immediately. Third eye for nonsense. Fully developed, fully operational. And Adaeze and Chisom, who had started all of this by being the kind of people who noticed things and who had the foundation beneath them to act on what they noticed, simply continued, being themselves, being present, being, when the moment required it, the kind of friends who open the door before you finish knocking. Thank you for watching Tale by Oluwatina, and I will see you in my next story. Bye, my loves.